Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So today I'm doing a video on the 2026 US Senate elections. Yesterday I went over all the states currently held by Republicans and I listed my top 5 targets for the Democrats that they could win. So 5 Republican Senate seats that I think are most likely to flip to the Democratic side. In yesterday's video towards the end, I promised I would do the flip. I would do the look at what I think are the top Republican seats, or the top seats that the Democrats currently hold that Republicans would hope to flip. So for this video, like I said in the last one, some popular Senate races that we've talked about in past videos like North Carolina or Maine or Ohio or Alaska or Texas are not going to be discussed in this video, as those are Republican seats that Democrats are seeking to flip. This video is going to be on the top 3 to 4 Democratic held Senate seats that Republicans are looking to try and flip. So with that said, the first seat that the Republicans are looking at to flip from the Democrats from blue to red, and the seat that I think stands the most chance of that happening right now, would be the state of Michigan. So Michigan's an interesting Senate race due to the fact that this is an open race. The Democratic incumbent Gary Peters is not running for re-election. Now, on the Republican side of things, we have a good amount of understanding on this race. We know that the Republican candidate is going to be Mike Rogers, who is the U.S. Senate nominee in 2024. Now, the good news for Mike Rogers was he came very close to winning the Senate race in 2024. He got 48.3% of the vote against the Democrat Elisa Slotkin in that 2024 race. Now, not to be all doom and gloom on the Republican chances, but that was also in 2024 with Donald Trump running at the top of the ticket, where he won the state of Michigan by about 1.5%. So Rogers' numbers likely were boosted by the president being on the same ticket as him, which in 2026 is just a reality. He won't have that same luxury. But being the past nominee from 2024, a lot of Republicans in the state, at very least, will know who he is. The main thing the Republicans have going for them right now is the Democratic primary and how competitive it is. Abdul El-Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, and Haley Stevens are the 3 main Democrats running in this race, and it is a complete and total grudge match in this Democratic primary. The most recent prediction market odds are really close. McMorrow is the current favorite at 65. Abdul El-Sayed is in second at 32. Haley Stevens in third at 13. But you can see throughout the course since April 4th of 2025 just how much this has fluctuated on this map. So it's a very competitive primary underway. As for the polling for the Democratic side, we can actually take a look at this here. McMorrow has a slight lead over the field, but look at the margins in which he does. On average, 24.3% from McMorrow, Stevens is 23%, and El-Sayed 19.4%. Still a third of the vote, 33.3%, are still undecided as of today. So a lot can happen in this Democratic primary, and that will shake what happens in the general election. As for the general election, though, it's a toss-up according to the top political prediction websites. Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, Sabato's Crystal Ball have it as a toss-up. Race to the White House and their rankings, they have it as a tilt for the Democrats. And it shows the matchups for the Democratic candidates versus Mike Rogers. Haley Stevens on average leads by roughly about 1.9%. For Abdul El-Sayed versus Mike Rogers, it's a completely different story. Mike Rogers is leading by about 3.2%. In Mallory McMorrow versus Mike Rogers, Rogers is currently leading, but the margin in which has gone down in the last few months. Rogers only up by 0.8. So the early polling thus far shows Abdul El-Sayed with the lowest amount of Democratic support consolidated behind him, and Mike Rogers with the highest amount of support consolidated behind him. So for the Republicans to win the state of Michigan, the thing they probably need the most to happen is for Abdul El-Sayed to win the Democratic primary to face off against Mike Rogers. Now, it's not like, for instance, a state like Texas, where Ken Paxton has some past scandals behind him that may hurt him in a general election. Abdul El-Sayed, haven't done a total big deep dive yet on him or his candidacy yet, but it seems in the polls at very least, Mike Rogers has the best chance of beating him in this race. So if the Republicans get Abdul El-Sayed to be the Democratic primary winner, that gives the Republicans a fighting chance in the state of Michigan. Still, though, the odds of the Republicans winning Michigan, according to the polls and the prediction markets, are currently an uphill battle. Right now, Democrats are favored roughly 80 to 22 on the Kalshi prediction market to win this race. So the Democrats are the clear favorites here, but the best thing the Republicans have going for them is the competitiveness of Michigan in 2024 on the Senate level and voting red for President Trump at the presidential level, and the Republicans essentially getting lucky with Abdul El-Sayed being the Democratic candidate. And even still, it's important to mention, even if Abdul El-Sayed is the Democrat, it's no guarantee the race does go red, because Rogers is leading by 3.2%, but still 13.8% of respondents are undecided. But for the Republicans' best chance at winning, they likely need Abdul El-Sayed to be the candidate. So for the purpose of today's video, talking about states that are blue that could go red, the Republicans winning the state of Michigan would have to most likely involve Abdul El-Sayed versus Mike Rogers, and that would give the Republicans the best chance at winning there. So that's the first state. The second state that I want to talk about is the most likely flip would then be the state of Georgia. Now, Georgia is one that looked like it could be a real Republican flip, honestly, about a year ago. And this is going to be Democrat U.S. Senator Jon Ossoff. And at the time, it was looking like current governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, was looking like a possible Republican Senate candidate. And the Republicans were leading in the odds roughly until Brian Kemp announced he would not be running. And then the odds very quickly went in Jon Ossoff's favor, as obviously they should. The thing Republicans have going for them in this race and trying to talk up could Republicans win is that Georgia's been very competitive at both the governor, Senate, and presidential level. Jon Ossoff won against David Perdue in the runoff election in 2021 by about 1.2%. But it's important to mention that in terms of the actual election on election night, David Perdue defeated Jon Ossoff 49.73%, Ossoff got 47.95%, and the third-party candidate Hazel got 2.32%. Now, in Georgia, the election law is that you have to break 50% of the vote or the top two candidates advance to a runoff. Obviously, that happened, and Ossoff ends up defeating Perdue by 1.2%. Still, it was a very competitive race. Raphael Warnock, the other senator that was up, other Democrat running for Senate in that election, defeated the Republican Kelly Loeffler by 2.1%. Then the election happens in 2022, where Raphael Warnock versus Herschel Walker, also under 50% on election night, advances to the runoff, and Warnock wins by 2.8%. So the pattern for the Democrats in Georgia seems to be that on the election night, if Republicans are going to win, they have to beat them on election night and break 50% of the vote. If it goes to a runoff election, like the last two did, Democrats have been 2-2, or technically, if you count 2020, 3-3 in the runoff elections for U.S. Senate. So that would be the Republicans' best chance on that one. Now, as for the Georgia Senate race, though, it's interesting because the Republican primary is still very much up for grabs at this point, with Buddy Carter, Derek Dooley, and U.S. Representative Mike Collins all battling it out to be the Republican nominee. Now, in the recent odds, it seems that Mike Collins, the Republican representative, is essentially running away with the primary. But when you look at the early polling data thus far, it's not looking as strong for the Republicans in Georgia as it did, say, a year ago when Brian Kemp was looking like to be the potential candidate. Still, for the general election, the Republicans are not 100% out of this yet. But Jon Ossoff certainly has a lead as of today. 2 out of the 4 rankings have this race listed as a toss-up, and 2 of them have it as lean for the Democrats. Jon Ossoff currently has 45.45% in the average of the 2 averages. Buddy Carter is 42.3%, Ossoff leading by 3.15%. For Jon Ossoff versus Mike Collins, similar numbers. Ossoff's at 46.05, Mike Collins at 42.85, a lead of about 3.2. And then for Jon Ossoff versus Derek Dooley, there's a lot less Republican support consolidated behind Dooley there. Ossoff's at 46.7, Dooley's at 39.9. Just to show you, for the sake of argument, what Ossoff versus Brian Kemp was looking like, in the early polls, Jon Ossoff was still polling right around 46-45%, where he is now in most polls, but Brian Kemp was at 48-49% in 3 out of the 4 polls, which is why Republicans felt they had a strong chance in this race. So without Kemp in this race to run against Ossoff, it certainly looks like Jon Ossoff is going to win re-election. But in the Republicans' video for what are the states they could flip, Georgia still gives the Republicans the second best odds due to the fact that Georgia is a very competitive state at the Senate and presidential level. And when the Democrats have won now 3 Senate races really in a row, the 2 specials in 2020 and Warnock's full term in 2022, all of which ended up being a runoff, and it was under 3 points in every single one. Now, for what 2026 ends up looking like, it's going to be tough, especially if this ends up being a very good night for the Democrats, as the historical expectation usually is. But the best thing I can say for the Republicans in this race right now, whether it's Mike Collins or Buddy Carter or maybe Derek Dooley, is there's a good amount, of undecided vote left out there. 13.4% for the Ossoff-Dooley race, 11.1% for the Ossoff-Collins race, and the 12.25% for the Ossoff versus Carter race. For the Republicans to win this race, it would be an upset. They would have to consolidate a lot of that support, and they would essentially have to catch Ossoff sleeping and win this race by probably right around 1 point, if not under, and would probably have to do it on election night. Again, speaking objectively, I think it's certainly a very big uphill battle for the Republicans. I think in this election environment, Jon Ossoff is probably going to win this. Had this race taken place in 2024, it's possible Republicans have a stronger chance even without Kemp in the race. But in 2026, I don't think it's much of a likely scenario. But again, the Republicans' best pickup opportunities, you have to put Georgia at very least in the top 2 as of right now. So that's the state of Georgia. The next one, and this is one that's kind of quietly coming out of nowhere, we have the state of New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire, when you look at it on face value, does not look like one that the Democrats are in too much danger of losing. The prediction markets right now have the Democrats favored at 85% or 85 to win, Republicans at 18 to win. The main ace in the hole for the Republicans in the state of New Hampshire is who the Republicans are running. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this race, this is U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen. She's decided not to run for re-election. On the Democratic primary side of things are pretty much set, locked in stone. The U.S. representative of the 1st District, Chris Pappas, is going to be the Democratic candidate. Now, on the Republican side, the Republicans wanted to have former Governor Chris Sununu be the Republican candidate. Ultimately, Sununu decided he did not want to run, but his brother, the former U.S. Senator from New Hampshire, John E. Sununu, is running in this race. He held this seat from 2003 to 2009, where he lost re-election in 2008 to Jeanne Shaheen, who has held the seat ever since. Also running in this race is former Massachusetts U.S. Senator Scott Brown as well. Now, in this race, though, John Sununu in the Republican primary has very clearly built up a massive lead in this race, leading on average over Scott Brown 48.1 to 23.8. So though Sununu is not breaking 50% yet with the amount of undecided vote that's left out there, and with Scott Brown currently polling in the mid-20s or so, Sununu essentially has his Republican primary all but locked away. Now comes to the general election, where this Senate race, which again is taking place in 2026, is listed at Tilt Democrat from Inside Elections and Race to the White House, and Lean Democrat from Cook Political Report and Sourdo's Crystal Ball. Now, this is actually very significant rankings, as New Hampshire, the past 2 times at the Senate level, have been pretty solid Democratic wins. New Hampshire, in 2020, Jeanne Shaheen won by 15.6%. The Republicans could not get a very well-known candidate to run against her. And in the 2022 race, Don Bolduc, who is someone, again, that I would not consider to be in that top tier of Republican candidates like a Sununu or even a Scott Brown or a Kelly Ayotte, he's, I would say, the tier below that, lost to Maggie Hassan by 9.1%. So the political prediction sites certainly have a lot more confidence in this race being closer than the 2020 and 22 results. It's also worth noting that the state of New Hampshire was only about a 3-point win for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential race after the polling didn't really show it being too much of a toss-up state and kind of became a shockingly close race in 2024. Now, the polls for Pappas versus Scott Brown, make no mistake, Pappas is favored to win by a very large margin, roughly leading by 9.2%. But for Chris Pappas versus John Sununu, it is a much different race. Chris Pappas is polling at 46.2%, Johnny Sununu polling at 42.5%, with still 11.3% of the vote remaining or undecided, Pappas leading by 3.3%. Including some most recent polls, St. Anselm College having it at a 3-point race for Pappas versus Sununu, and Pappas versus Sununu in the Emerson College poll, only a 1-point race. Now, the big takeaway I would say so far in this race is, yes, Chris Pappas is leading, make no mistake, Pappas has led in every single poll thus far, and look at the amount of support that Sununu is currently getting. 44% from Emerson, St. Anselm has him at 43%, University of New Hampshire has him at 45%. So, Sununu is getting roughly about 44-45% of the vote or lower. Obviously, in a Senate race, you're not going to win with 44-45%. But there's a lot of undecided vote left out there. And what's most important in a race like this, which the Democrats are expected to hold, if the Democratic candidate is not breaking 49-50% of the vote, it gives the Republicans a fighting chance in this race. Now, again, not to be too much of a broken record here, but given the election environment of 2026 and the track record of New Hampshire at the presidential and Senate level, I would expect this race to still stay in the Democratic hands. But Johnny Sununu is giving the Republicans a rare opportunity at a competitive U.S. Senate race in New Hampshire, which it has not really had since the 2016 Senate race of Kelly Ayotte, then Senator, versus Maggie Hassan, then Governor of New Hampshire. So this is certainly the first competitive Senate race in New Hampshire since then, and Sununu is giving the Republicans a real fighting chance. Now, that being said, I do still think Pappas wins this race by probably around 2 to 3% or so when everything is said and done, and those undecided votes end up going their way. But the Sununu name in New Hampshire is very popular. Obviously, Sununu being the former U.S. Senator, Chris Sununu being the governor of New Hampshire. It's going to get a lot of independents that would probably vote Democrat in many other races, and probably will vote Democrat on a lot of the ticket in New Hampshire to at least consider voting for Sununu at the top of the ticket. And in the Republicans' best scenario, it's possible New Hampshire could go for John Sununu probably by under a point, and could be a possible flip for the Republicans. New Hampshire, again, I don't think right now is favored to go to the Republicans, but in the top potential flips, you would have to put New Hampshire in that list as well. This is where I think the list sort of ends for the realistic possible Republican flips. And again, I'm saying realistic very loosely. I recognize that all the polling, getting ahead of some of the comments now, the polling and prediction markets don't show any of these 3 Senate races as Republican flips right now. The election environment doesn't suggest that they will be. But of the possible Republican flips, these are the top 3 that I would go with right now. One outside the box one, because I was looking at the rest of the Senate map, trying to find one more. I gave the Democrats 5 flips. I couldn't find 5 for the Republicans, but one more thing the Republicans would love to try and target would be the state of Minnesota. And again, this is an absolute stretch and a half, but bear with me on this one. The Democrats are heavily favored to win this race, but it is an open race with U.S. Senator Tina Smith not running for re-election. Democrats are favored 90 to 10 to win this race. And the main, I would say, caveat for Minnesota is that it's an open race, and the Tina Smith races actually showed a good amount of being competitive. Now, on the Democratic side, there are 2 Democrats running in Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan, and both of which honestly stand pretty similar for the general election. The polling is going to show that in 1 second. The Republican side of things, 2 notable Republicans are running: Royce White, the nominee from 2024, and Michelle Tafoya, the former NFL sports broadcaster. I think Tafoya would give the Republicans a better chance in this race. She's someone with more of a national profile than Royce White, and maybe would be able to win over more independent voters than Royce White would. And that gives the Republicans a little bit of a chance here. But make no mistake, this is going to be a Democratic win, but likely Democratic across the board. In the last Senate races in Minnesota, Klobuchar won by 15.7 in 2024, but Tina Smith only won by 5.2% in 2024 with a lot of vote splitting. If everything went perfect for the Republicans, could there be a scenario where Craig and Peggy Flanagan get around 47%, Michelle Tafoya can get around 47%, and there could be a third-party candidate that sort of gives the Republicans a potential pathway to winning? Again, no, I don't think so, but for the sake of the video, I'm trying to find a 4th one for the Republicans. I think Minnesota would be next up on the list. I'm not giving too much attention to Minnesota because I'm sure there's going to be comments saying Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire are not realistic flips, and if those are not realistic, Minnesota's not even in the same planet as realistic. But for the Republicans' top 4 targets, I think it goes Georgia, Michigan, New Hampshire, Minnesota. Now, do I think any of them flip? Right now, no. If any of them were to flip, though, I think it's possible. Michigan, if Abdul Sayed is a Democratic candidate. Chris Pappas versus John Sununu in New Hampshire. I can't wait to watch how that one goes. That one, the Republicans do have a very legitimate chance. Georgia, I think John Ossoff holds on and wins, but Republicans really have to get lucky in that one for any chance of winning that. Minnesota, no, I don't think the Republicans have any chance, but I wanted to throw Minnesota in for the sake of the video and sort of talking that one through, because that's a Senate race that's not going to get probably a lot of attention because it's not going to be too competitive at the end of the day. But even still, obviously this is a hypothetical scenario. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a comment below. If you enjoyed it, I'll be linking at the end of this video the video I did yesterday on the Democrats' top 5 flips or potential flips to go from red to blue. Make sure to check those out if you enjoyed this video. For now, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you in a future video.